Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers. Today, we are continuing our prospect pool series, where we're taking a look at a handful of prospect pools from around the NHL. Today, we'll be looking at the Detroit Red Wings and the Colorado Avalanche, continuing our rivalry or connected team series after doing Buffalo and Vancouver and then Toronto and Montreal. We've got the late 90s, 2000s rivalry here. I'm your host, Logan Horn, and today I am joined by my co-hosts and fellow prospect analysts, Matthew Zator and Peter Baracchini. How are you doing today, Matt?
Doing good. The season's closer.
Absolutely.
Preseason, and Traverse City's coming up, so that's going to be fun to cover here too. And two of the teams that the Red Wings and the Maple Leafs are going to be part of that, so that's going to be fun to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all getting pretty close. Like NHL training camps start in about 3 weeks from when we're recording this, and roughly the same from when you'll be listening to this probably. So we're not too far off, but there's not a lot of prospect stuff to talk about then. So who knows? This series might continue into that a little bit. Peter, how are you doing this morning?
Doing good. Yeah. As soon as we're getting in with all the prospect talk of who can make it, who can't, it's going to be entertaining to see how that's going to unfold. But yeah, I'm just excited for the rookie tournament to start because kind of like the Helenka Gretzky, that's the unofficial kickoff to the hockey season. Although not a whole lot at stake there. It's just for bragging rights. But you know what?
Yeah.
Hockey's hockey at this point. Let's get it going.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take whatever we can get right now. It'll get more interesting as it goes, but we'll take it, even though there's no reason. It doesn't really have that much power or sway in anything. It's just a nice first look, get some competition going. That'll be fun. So good thing that's coming up soon because we are starved for hockey these days. Anyway, we'll kick off our prospect pool review thing for today with the Detroit Red Wings. So Peter, I'm going to come to you first for this. Can you give me a quick top 5 ranking of the best Red Wings prospects in your eyes?
Yeah. This is going to be easier compared to what we're going to be doing later on. I'm just going to say that right now, but, top 5 Red Wings prospects. I think it's going to be, for me, Sebastian Cossa at 5, Axel, Sandin, Pellikka at 4. Trying to think. Okay, yeah. Marco Kasper 3, Nate Danielson 2, and then obviously Simon Edvinsson 1. I drew a blank there for a quick second. I had my top 3 written down. I couldn't find my notes, and yeah. So those are my top 5 right there. Yeah,
that's actually my exact top 5 as well.
Oh, really? Oh.
I've shuffled mine around here and there, and it will not stop changing. I've thought about having Carter Mazur up there, but I just don't. I don't think the upside is as high as a lot of these guys. And honestly, Danielson isn't that far behind Edvinsson for me right now. As you guys know from the whole last year of draft conversations, I'm pretty high on Nate Danielson.
Big fan.
But Simon Edvinsson still edges him out, partly just because we've seen him in pro hockey for multiple seasons, and Danielson won't do that for another season or two at least. Matt, I'll come to you next here then. What is your top 5 for Red Wings prospects right now?
All right, I got Carter Mazur at 5, Axel, Sandin, Pellikka at 4, Nate Danielson 3, Marco Kasper 2, and Simon Edvinsson top prospect.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Mazur has been excellent. Like he was on Team USA for the World Championships. I know they didn't have a lot of NHL players, but he looked pretty good there. And also Derek Lalonde, the head coach for the Red Wings, was an assistant coach for USA. So, start building that relationship, start earning some brownie points for training camp early. I think that was probably a good setup for Mazur. Okay, so we're all pretty close there. Just 6 prospects in total, I think, in our lists. So the high end of their prospect pool, we all kind of agree on. But now I want to hear you guys' thoughts on the most important players here. So Matt, I'll come to you first. Who do you think is the most important prospect for the Red Wings right now?
That's tough because you could either go defense, which they have quite a few. It's very deep on D, and their forward group's pretty good now too. I don't know. Most important, I'm still going to say it's Simon Edmondson at the top because they've got Moritz Seider. We all know how good he is, but to kind of compete with the teams that are coming up, especially the Buffalo Sabres, who got Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin leading the ways. It'd be great if they can have Seider and Edmondson as their pillars. I think he's still going to be the most important going forward because if you have a strong defense, you're going to solve a lot of problems if even if your forwards don't hit. But Edmondson still my most important in the Red Wings pool.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, you can't build a great decor with just one excellent player. I guess you would know that as a Canucks fan. Hopefully that's changing here though. They got Hronek. But anyway, Edmondson hitting as like at least like a really solid second pairing guy would be huge at this point because they haven't had 2 great defensemen in quite a while. Peter, what are your thoughts? Who do you think is the most important prospect for Detroit?
I'm going to have to pick Koza because their whole goaltending situation isn't really the best and one that may not be the one to get them over the top in the near future. I mean, there's still some question marks surrounding Husso. They got James Reimer coming in as the backup, but you don't have anyone else to follow after they also did sign Alex Lyon, but is that magical run coming to an end after what he did for the Panthers kind of thing, you need somebody to step up, and I think he's going to be important for them because they picked him over Jesper Wallstedt. So that's a lot of big shoes to fill. He's going to be an important and integral part of this team going forward if he can reach to that starter potential and be that guy to eat up minutes, play games, make the stops needed to. He's starting to show some steps in his development that he's starting to maintain that, which is a good sign. But I think that he's still got a ways to go in order to get to that point, but he's still going to be an important factor because, I mean, yes, you can get by with, average goaltending, as we saw with the Vegas Golden Knights, Colorado Avalanche last year with Darcy Kemper, how they were kind of just average and, needed to do their job in order to win. But, if you get an elite goaltender, Kosa already has a size in the frame for that. He just needs to work on his movement and his ability to track the puck a little bit more. But he's got that going. So if he's able to do that, I think they'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with you there, Peter, that Kosa's the most important right now. There's a lot of guys you could argue for, like Danielson and Casper being good NHL centers would be huge for them. But
we know what they're going to be at this point.
Sure, it feels like a little more of a set in stone thing, or at least closer to that than Kosa being a great goalie in the NHL. Really improved in the ECHL last year, but it's very rare you see high-end goalies go through that league. Not saying that he's not going to be an exception, but it's just not a common route at all. Usually goalies can handle the AHL around that age. Typically though, the NCAA to AHL route has been a little kinder to goalies lately, instead of CHL to AHL. But if Kosa can, acquit himself pretty well as a backup, maybe if he's lucky as like a true tandem goalie in the AHL for the Grand Rapids Griffins, that would be huge. And then you can hopefully build to being the starter, maybe do that for a year or two, and then crack the NHL roster. I mean, goalies take longer to develop on average, but you look at Jesper Wallstedt, Yaroslav Askarov, some of these guys that are taken around the same time as him, whether you like it or not, whether it's fair or not, he's going to be compared to them for his whole career. And they are almost certainly going to be in the NHL much sooner than him, which doesn't mean that they're better, but they might be better sooner, and then it'll take some time for him to catch up. The difference between Kosa being just okay and being excellent is massive for Detroit. Partly because of all the value they put into drafting him so high, but also because, I mean, yes, you can get through the playoffs with mediocre goaltending, except that like Aiden Hill in the playoffs last year was incredible for like a month and a half, and pretty mediocre for a lot of the rest of his career. But he was elite for a month and a half, and so you still need them to play well. I don't know. It's a tough line to walk, and hopefully Costa can hit, because I think that would be huge for Detroit at this point. Okay, onto a little more of a fun one here. Matt, I'll come to you first. Who's your favorite prospect for the Red Wings? There's a lot to choose from. It's a pretty deep pool.
It's pretty deep. I'm not going to pick the guy that I've talked about quite a bit, because he's one of the next categories. But I'll pick Axel, Sandin, Pellikka. I've if you've watched this show, I know about the draft and stuff, and he's been one of my favorite defensemen. And now that he's a Red Wings prospect, he's even more my favorite. So he's going to end up being a really good defenseman in the NHL. I think he'll end up being like, Devin in his rankings has him ahead of Nate Danielson in his rankings, and he was drafted below him. So he's going to end up being a very exceptional guy to kind of complement Edvinsson and Seider. And we'll see how his defensive game goes in the NHL, but he's still my favorite, or one of my favorites, because there's a few I could choose from, but I'll pick him for this category, at least for this episode.
Yeah, you can change your mind for another episode.
Yeah.
He's so much fun to watch. Like there's been some clips coming out of preseason play in Sweden, and he's so fearless. He'll just take the puck all the way up the ice on his own against guys that are 3 or 4 inches taller than him. No problems. Just take the puck from his zone to the offensive zone all on his lonesome. He's going to be fun. And yeah, I think he'd be a really nice balance between the towering guys that Detroit's bringing in on the back end, Seider, Edvinsson, Valinder, anyone like that who are like 6'3" and up. I think he'll be a nice balance of styles and size. Really fun one. Peter, who is your favorite prospect in the Red Wings pool right now?
I don't know if you're going to be taking him, Logan. I'm pretty sure you are, but I'm just going to say I am going to say Nate Danielson. You got me on that train as soon as you said keep an eye out for him, and as the season progressed last season with the WHL, you could see why they took him as high as they did. Maybe a little bit of a shock and maybe a bit of a reach, but for him to have the production that he did on a poor Brandon Wheat Kings team and still be a very contributing factor offensively, 78 points, that's a big win. And the fact that you add him, the smarts that he has away from the puck, not only what he can do, but he's very sound positionally. He's able to get back and help back on the back check. And, he just has the sense that just screams Detroit Red Wings hockey. Like, he's got the smarts there. So I've really grown to like him as the season progressed, especially in the second half last season. And, the Red Wings definitely got a good, potential second line center for them underneath Dylan Larkin. So to have that as your 1-2 punch is going to be a really good sign. He could just be, again, he may show some flashes, not as flashy as Larkin, but he does have the same qualities as him as well. So big fan of those two-way centers, big fan of the smarts. And that's why I'm a big fan of Danielson, because yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the Larkin comparison. I feel like the biggest difference at this point is that Danielson doesn't have the speed of Larkin. Yeah. Like, Larkin's known for being just like a high-end skater in the NHL. I don't think Danielson will be that, but I agree that there's a lot of other similarities in the shot, the smarts, he is quite agile as a skater. He just doesn't have the top speed. Of a Dylan Larkin. He's not going to break any records at the fastest skater competition or anything. But yeah, I'm a huge Danielson guy. I'll go for someone new because there's a lot of guys I like here, but I'm going to go with Marco Kasper. I think no matter where he ends up in an NHL lineup, if he's a second or third line center, which I think he could be, if he's a top 6 winger, which I think he could be, he's going to be a fan favorite very quickly. He works so hard, charges the net. He gets in scrums. Like, he played one NHL game this last year think that was against Toronto, actually. So Peter might have seen it too. And he gets under people's skin very quickly. It doesn't take much. He will smack the goalie's pads after the whistle's gone. He will shove guys around, even though he's not the hugest player, but and he's younger and little smaller than these big scary defensemen of the NHL. But he's not scared. He works hard. He fights for possession in the corners, keeps the play alive. He doesn't have high-end offensive skill. I mean, he showed a lot more offense last year than we expected him to, which is promising. But I think he's just going to be more of a play-driving two-way winger that, well, he could be a center. He definitely could be a center, I think. But if Danielson hits as a solid second-line center, then I feel like Kasper has a shot on one of those top two lines as well. He's just going to be hardworking, fan favorite, no doubt. I'm a big fan of Kasper, so that'll be my favorite here. There's actually quite a few choices for this next one. I'll start it off for this one. The most underrated prospect for the Red Wings. I'm going to go with Dmitry Bachelnikov. It's my pick. Super under the radar in the 2022 draft. I had never heard of him when he was selected in the second round by Detroit. A lot of people hadn't heard of him. I don't know about you guys. But apparently he had been kind of a rising star. He went undrafted in 2021, but then absolutely dominated the Russian Junior League, the MHL. Last season, he played almost exclusively in the VHL, the second tier pro league. He's very small, but he has a ton of skill and a huge shot. Scored a lot of goals, a lot of one-timers. And it looks like he's going to probably spend time in the KHL this year. I think he actually was just loaned because trying to be a high-scoring winger on a team that has Matvei Michkov and Ivan Demidov in the KHL is kind of tough. It's kind of hard to find a role as a young offense-only winger with those guys on the same team. So I'll double check while one of you answers, but I believe he was loaned. I think it might have been to HK Sochi, who Michkov played for last year. But I see potential in him as an offensive type. I don't think he'll provide much defensive value. He's quite undersized, but a lot of skill, big shot. So I'll go with Bachelnikov. Matt, what are your thoughts? Who do you think is the most underrated prospect for Detroit?
This is where I'm going to use he is one of my favorites. Emil Viro, and he's not underrated in my mind, obviously, but he's a very under the radar, I'd say, prospect that's going to end up being a very big part of this Red Wings defense core in the future, because he can complement those offensive defensemen. Very solid, good skater, very calm defensively. Played most of the season in Grand Rapids last year, but then played a bit in the ECHL, I think in December. But, Sean Horkov's assistant general manager in Detroit said that he thought that Viro played a lot better after he played in the ECHL for that short time, because he just went down there, played a lot of minutes. Because Grand Rapids, I mean, obviously with all their defensemen, he didn't have a lot of time. But when he came back, played a lot more confident. And now he'll probably play the whole season in the AHL this coming season. He did play the rest of the season, wasn't sent down again. So, but then he was playing the ECHL playoffs until the Western Conference final. So, I mean, he's got some playoff experience now in the ECHL. He'll come into camp and hopefully get a role in Grand Rapids, because, I mean, that defense didn't really thin out. I mean, Donovan Zabrango was traded, so maybe there's a bit more of an opening, but they still got some really good defensemen, especially if Simon Edmondson won't play in the NHL. He'll play in the AHL most likely because of the logjam they got up there. But I love Viro. I think he's going to end up being like a Chris Tanev, Jacob Slavin type defenseman, where you don't notice him a lot on the ice, but that's because he's just doing his job. So I love Viro. I still think he's underrated in a lot of people's mind, but watch out for him when he does get to the NHL, because I think he's going to be a big part of this team.
Nice. That's a good one. I always forget how big of a Viro fan you are. I'm happy you keep bringing him up. Definitely underappreciated, I think. I do want to say the Bachelnikov loan, that was just a rumor that I was reading about, actually, because Alex Galchenyuk actually just signed with SKA as well. offense only winger. So speaking of offense only wingers, so it's possible. It's not something that has happened yet. It's something that has been talked about by several people, but not anything organized or official yet. So just want to mention that. Peter, what about you? Who do you think is an underrated prospect for Detroit?
I'm going to pick two, and I'm going to be very brief on both of them. I'm going to kind of break the rules here. One I've talked about on the grind line before, and that's Amadeus Lombardi. Very, very strong cerebral playmaker. He's very deceiving with the puck control and the stick handling that he has. And he had a massive jump from 59 points to 102 this season with the Firebirds, got in 2 games in the AHL and recorded 1 assist during the regular season. So obviously, there's still a bit of a development curve for him to try and reach and get more meaningful minutes in the AHL, but he took a massive step as, a leader on the team. Not as he didn't wear a letter, but he was the big time point producer. He was heavily relied on in that regard. And I think that, he does have a chance to be a very underrated playmaker for the Red Wings, kind of in a middle 6 depth role. But then again, he's a center. They got a log jam at center. Who knows what's going to happen? But I still like him. I still like the skill that he brings and the deceptiveness that he has his playmaking game. Underrated shooter as well. And the other one is Tanias Mathurin. And I was a big fan of his during his draft year, was taken, I believe, in the 5th round by the Red Wings in 2022. You're probably wondering, if you go and check his stat page, why am I picking a guy that only played in 1 game this year? Well, he did have a shoulder injury, but as I was scouting him last year, he was very steady. He was very quiet, but he doesn't stand out, but he's very effective on the back end, getting into lanes, blocking shots, but also being a very effective puck mover with the breakouts and transitional game as well. May not produce a lot of points, but he's very strong in that regard to be a contributing factor to the offense in regards to, leading the play. And I think that that's really something that the Red Wings, they have an abundance of prospects in that regard. And Zator, Edmondson, Vero, even they got a lot of top names, Albert Johansson, but he's one that could definitely be a very solid all around 3rd pairing defenseman that can have an impact down the line. Again, I was a big fan of his, and I was a big fan when Detroit selected him because he's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few guys here. Matt, you talked about the log jam on D, especially, well, I'd say probably only on the left side. But yeah, last year they had 6, 7 guys that probably could have played in the AHL on the left side of defense. Some of them moved to the right side. Some of them went down to the ECHL for times for portions of the season. And I mean, there's no need to be concerned and start trading them away, rashly trading them away until that logjam is in the NHL and you have 5 NHL defensemen that you can't get all of them into the lineup even after injuries. But it looks like that could be a great problem, but could be a problem for Detroit in a couple of years, which is wonderful because they've had no depth anywhere for a long time. So that'd be nice to deal with the opposite for a little bit. Okay, I just got one more question for the Detroit half here. And Matt, I'll come to you first on this one. Where would you place Detroit's prospect pool across the league? Where would you put them?
They're really strong. I think they're in that, maybe closing in on top 5. I'm going to say 6. I think they're in that realm. I don't think they're in the top 5, but just outside. There's a few other teams I think have stronger overall prospect pools, but they do got really good prospects, high-end prospects in probably every position group. So, in forwards, defense, and of course with Kosa and goaltending, and then they added Trey Augustine as well. So that really bolstered that goaltending spot too. So I'm going to say just outside the top 5, but very, very outside the top 5. I could probably put him in the top 5 too, but I'm going to say just outside of it.
Yeah, for sure. That seems pretty fair to me. Peter, what about you? Where would you rank Detroit across the league?
I would probably put them in the top 10, just inside or maybe just outside in that 9 to 14 range. Again, as Matt alluded to, very strong names, but there are just some question marks with some prospects that, you don't quite have the answer. Kosa being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great name, but you want to see more of what he can do. You want to see more of what some of those other prospects can do. That have that middle six depth, because it seems like their top six and top pairing spots are already solidified. You want to see what everyone else can do at that point. And they got a lot of good depth, which is good for that spot. I'm just not so, in previous years I was high on them, maybe now not so much as being in the top 5, but still worthy of being within that top 10 or just outside the top 10 for sure.
Yeah, I think they're in a bit of an interesting spot. Obviously, Lucas Raymond, Jonathan Berggren, and some of those guys, Seider, are all in the NHL lineup. So those guys come out of the prospect pool. But the guys left in the pool, there's a lot of really good prospects, but not really anyone that I'd consider like an elite one. Maybe Edvinsson, depending on how you feel about him. Guys that'll provide a ton of value, be mainstays in the lineup for a long time, no problem, absolutely. But they don't have someone that I expect to like push for being an all-star or being like an elite top line player, top pairing guy. Not that you need that at every phase of a rebuild, but I'm sure they'd be happy with it. Having Seider already in the NHL and adding Alex DeBrincat, like that all helps a ton. But the prospect pool itself doesn't really have someone of that caliber at this point, I don't think. So I feel like I'm somewhere in between both of you. I'd say top 10 for sure, but somewhere between 5 and 10, maybe 7 or 8, 6 or 7. I don't know, somewhere in there. There are teams that I would rank higher that have less depth, but just have more star power at the top. But that's all in how you value prospect pools and what you think is worth more. Because even though they have less great prospects, like I would have the Blackhawks ranked higher, largely on the back of Connor Bedard, but also like Kevin Korchinski, Frank Nazar are really solid prospects there. But Bedard does a lot of the heavy lifting. So yeah, I'd say between 5 and 10 for me. So we're all kind of just spanning the gap from 5 to 14 or something. Somewhere in there feels right. Who knows where? We'll see in a few years, maybe. All right, so we're just going to take a quick break here, but we'll be right back after a quick word from the Hockey Writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
All right, so we're going to jump in with our second team for today, the Colorado Avalanche. Not as good of a prospect pool, but they just won a Stanley Cup just over a year ago, so I'm sure no one is upset that I'm saying that. Well, they'll be upset, but they won't be that upset because they just won a Stanley Cup, and this is what happens when you compete for that year in, year out, and when you actually win. You don't tend to have a great prospect pool unless you're Carolina, because they always have a good prospect pool somehow. Anyway, Colorado, this is a bit tougher, not gonna lie. But Peter, I'll come to you first. Can you give me a top 5 ranking of the best Avalanche prospects?
Yeah, top 5, I believe. Not I believe. I'm pretty sure they're going to be. We're all probably going to say the same thing, but probably different range. But Jean-Luc Foudy at 5, Shane Behrens at 4, Oscar Olausson 3, Mikhail Gulyayev 2, and then obviously Callum Ritchie number 1. That's going to be my top 5 right there.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's probably going to be similar or almost maybe identical for all of us. Matt, who do you have as the top 5 Avs prospects?
All right, I got Jean-Luc Foudy at 5, Oscar Olausson at 4, Sean Behrens at 3, and Callum Ritchie at 2, Mikhail Gulyayev at 1.
Okay, yeah, we all have the same 5, just all in different orders, actually. I have Behrens at 5, Olausson 4. I have Jean-Luc Foudy 3. I'll talk about him in a little bit. Gulyayev 2 and Richie number 1. Those top 2 guys are for sure their top 2. They got them both in the 2023 draft. You could argue they're in either order, though, for sure. They're pretty talented, like real NHL prospects. The rest of the group, definitely NHL prospects, but then there's not a lot of depth past that because they've traded quite a few picks and prospects for help right now, which was a good choice, clearly. So, Matt, I'll come to you first on this one. Who do you think is the most important prospect in their pipeline? This is a totally different question than when we asked it about Detroit, because for Detroit, it's projecting into the future. But for this, it's more kind of like who's going to help them the most while they're competitive. So who do you think? What are your thoughts?
It's funny because this guy's not in my top 5. He's actually it's Eustace Sandin, the goaltender, and because they don't have they do got some NHL goaltenders in the sit right now playing for them, but beyond them, who do they have that's going to be able to take over the goaltending spot? I know they keep just signing free agents. They had Darcy Kemper, won the cup with them. He left, and then they just get and he's slipping my mind who they have right now.
Georgiev,
yeah. I got so it is not Grubauer. Yes. So he's they need some young guys to kind of push their way in, and I think Annan is probably he is their top goaltending prospect. And did play a couple games last season, but I think he's the most important in the overall because, like you said, they need guys to start kind of pushing their way in now. I don't know if they're really concerned about it because, like I said, they just keep going through different goaltenders, trading for them, signing them. Grubauer, that's why Grubauer was on my mind because he wasn't that long ago either as their goaltender. So it may not be in their mind, but I think he's probably the most important just because it would be great if they could have a young goaltender kind of grow with. I don't know if their next core, whoever that is, but right now it's clearly the McKinnon show still, and for the long term because he just signed that massive contract. But I'm going to go with Annan as the most important.
Nice, I like that. I mean, goaltenders are always valuable, always important, and he had a really solid year with the Eagles in the AHL last year, so he could be building towards being a real player for them, no doubt. Big goalie there. Peter, what are your thoughts? Who do you think is the most important prospect for the Avs right now?
He definitely could be an important one, but I'm going to save him for my favorite section. I'm going to say Sean Behrens, and I don't remember if I said Shane or Sean before. Allergies are really getting to me right now, so if I'm a bit delirious and confused, that is probably why. But Sean Behrens is going, because I heard Matt said Sean, and I can't believe if I said that or whatever, but it is going to be Behrens for me, mainly because he's kind of like the most experienced, or I'm going to say tenured prospect that they have. Drafted in 2021. Obviously, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but he's a player that, and we were talking before the show about how he doesn't quite have the offensive upside, but he does have the defensive game. He can. It's hard to project. Again, it's very tough with the Avalanche. It's very hard to project where he's going to be, but he can be a second line or second pairing defender. Most likely, realistically, he's going to be third because you don't know what his offensive ceiling is going to be like. 21 points in 31 games with the University of Denver. It's lower than the 29 that he had the year before, albeit in 6 fewer games. Not necessarily ideal that you want to see from one of your top defenders, but he does possess a very responsible two-way game. And I think if he's able to just piece everything together, I think he's going to be a very key factor for them going forward, and probably someone that could, it probably won't happen, but they would like to have him sooner in the lineup rather than later, because they're pretty set on defense, but you could have another option for the future. And I think he's definitely one that can learn under the likes of Devon Toews, Cale Makar, and everyone like that. So I'm hoping that he could be an important piece for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so too. I just have trouble projecting Behrens into the NHL. As you mentioned, he doesn't really have the offense of in the like maybe second tier of college defense prospects, like Seamus Casey scores a ton. He doesn't have that level of offense. So when he gets to the NHL, will he score? I'm not sure. But then he's also 5'10". So even though he defends well in college, I would be concerned someone who's 5'10" and isn't the best or fastest skater, at least. How well are you going to be able to defend NHL forwards coming at you? I don't know. So if I'm not sure that he's got offense or defense in the NHL, it's kind of tough to pencil him into the lineup anytime soon. He definitely could. Like maybe he goes to the Eagles and he shows that it is possible that he can do it against pro players. Wouldn't be too surprised about that. But it's just kind of hard to project him into the NHL for me at this point. For me, I think the most important prospect is Callum Ritchie. You saw after Nazem Kadri left, after they won the cup, their center depth just disappeared immediately. And so I think having Callum Ritchie come in as an NHL centerman, if things go well, I can see him being a second line center in the NHL. Last year, we know he was held back a bit by a shoulder injury throughout the season, but he showed some inconsistency. Was that lack of effort or just struggling through an injury? We don't really know. We'll get hopefully a better look at a healthy Ritchie this year. The two-way play, the puck skill, I believe is a right-handed shot, if I'm correct. I don't know about that. He's a big centerman. He's got NHL center qualities for sure. So if he can hit as a second line center, even as a good third line center, I think that would be huge, because these moves were kind of in concert with them trading away Alex Newhook, who never quite, at least in Colorado, never quite hit the potential that they had seen for him as a NHL centerman higher in the lineup. So hopefully Ritchie they can reset the clock and start with another 18-year-old again and hope he makes it instead. But, I think he could be in the NHL soon. So we'll have to wait and see, though. Favorite prospect on the Avs. Peter, I'll come to you for this one again. Who's your favorite prospect here for Colorado?
Yeah, I mean, you picked him as an important one, Logan. I'm going to go with Callum Ritchie as my favorite one, mainly because of the smarts and IQ that he possesses. Obviously, when you look at the whole package, he has everything that you want in that two-way centerman. He's got the skills and the puck handling abilities in tight spaces. I kind of, refer to him as a more polished Connor Geekie kind of player, because Geekie was able to make those plays in tight spaces, but he lacked the speed. Ritchie kind of has a speed, maybe not as much, but he has that long stride to at least create that separation. But the smarts that he's able to make with and without the puck is the big reason why he's my favorite prospect for not only last year in the draft, but also for the Avalanche right now. Because, when you got to put him, or if there's an injury to, let's say, Nathan McKinnon, and he's down and you need someone to move up, at least he has the smarts and whereabouts to possibly create that chemistry with, the likes of the wingers that they have in like Mikko Rantanen and all that. Again, looking way too far into the future right now, but he does have the smarts to adapt and the ability to move up in the lineup and be a key contributing factor. So that's why he's my favorite prospect.
Yeah, that's fair. I think also, like, you look at the center depth right now, they lost JT Compher to Detroit this summer as one of their centers. So it's Nathan McKinnon and then probably Ryan Johansson, although he's injured right now. So who knows if he'll be there to start the season or if he'll be up to speed to start the season. He might have to start lower in the lineup. Jonathan Drouin, if you're feeling nasty. Ross Colton, but you preferably have him on your third line, kind of a checking, play driving guy. And then currently, this is Cap Friendly's depth chart. They have Ben Myers as the fourth line center. So I don't think it'll take too long for Callum Ritchie to be able to crack that depth chart at center. I don't know that Ben Myers will be better than Callum Ritchie 12 months from now. I kind of find that hard to believe, but we'll have to see if Ritchie's offense pops a little in the OHL this year, which I think it will, because he 59 points in 59 games. I think this year we kind of expected 70 plus from him, but hopefully without an injury, he can pop off a bit. Let me see. Favorite prospect. Matt, who's your favorite prospect for the Avs?
Yeah, it's going to be Gulyayev. He's my top prospect, obviously, and my favorite as well. He's like we talked about him quite a bit during the draft coverage, and I'm surprised that of course the Avalanche get him late in the first round. But they already have Cale Makar. Gulyayev's going to end up being not Makar, obviously, but he's going to be very good. Very good offensive skill, and again, a defenseman that's going to thrive in the NHL in the future. And he jumps up to the top of the prospect pool just because of the lack of strength, but he is a really good prospect. I think he'd probably be in the top 10 in a lot of pools, but depending on, I guess, if ones are really high, but he's still a really good prospect, and he's very exciting to watch. I love defensemen like him, so he's my favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. We love Gulyayev here. Just tons of skill, great skating. Like I've heard people, I think it was Grant McKaig like months ago was like the Russian Cale Makar. And it's like, okay, that might be a little over the top.
Bit of a stretch.
Stylistically,
Yeah.
I get it. I kind of get the comparison stylistically. I mean, talent-wise, size-wise, like it's still not really an apt comparison. But Gulyayev has a ton of offense to give. Will he be able to defend at all? I don't know. But he's got a ton of skill, ton of offense, and I think enough to be in the NHL in a serious role, even if he has to be sheltered a bit at 5-on-5. He's going to be a big part of their power play someday, it feels like. Probably my favorite prospect too. I'll go with Gulyayev. Matt, I'll come to you next for this one because you have a fun one. Who do you think is the most underrated prospect for the Avalanche?
This one was tough because they don't have a lot of guys, but I'm going to go with Colby Ambrosio. He's a guy that, well, obviously because he's undersized, he's also a guy that I when I was looking through the prospect pool, trying to find an underrated guy, and he caught my eye. So he's my underrated. I don't know if he's underrated in a lot of people's minds, but he's not a guy that you would say Avalanche prospects. Oh yeah, Ambrosio is one of them. But undersized, 5'9", very good skater, very good on the rush, very skilled. He didn't blow up in college. He's not like one of those high end guys. I think he's probably gonna have to show a bit more production this season to kind of move forward in this development and move to the AHL and actually do score or even just get signed to his ELC. So, but he caught my eye just because of his skill and because he's undersized and performing. Even though he isn't a high end producer in the NCAA this past season or hasn't been yet, but hopefully this season, his senior year, he'll pop off and prove me right that he's an underrated, no longer underrated when we talk about prospect pool next year. But keep an eye on him this season. We'll see what he does in his final year in college and if he can force the Avalanche to sign him to a contract.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great pick. Someone who I definitely don't think of first when I think of Avs prospects, like you said. But I feel like his ability in transition, and he wins tons of faceoffs. He's like 5'9", I think.
Yeah,
5'9", 5'10". You're in tough to make the NHL at that point, but he does drive play pretty well in the right direction. He wins lots of faceoffs. Like there's a chance he's a bottom 6 forward for the Avs someday. I wouldn't be too surprised. I like that pick. Little tough, like you said, to find underrated guys here because, like we said before, the top 2 are like clearly the top 2. The rest of the top 5 is probably pretty clearly the top 5. So it's hard to argue that they're underrated because they're the only ones that are rated, kind of. But you can still pick them if you want, Peter. I'm going to pick one of them because I feel like it. Peter, who do you think is the most underrated prospect here?
See, it's kind of like Matt. I was scrolling through. I was like, oh, Sampo Ranta, but he's unsigned and he's going to play over in Sweden.
Yep.
If you're going from the AHL to Sweden, chances are you're not going to be there. I was even just looking at Taylor Makar because of just the name. But you know what? I'm going to have to say not applicable. I really don't see any name that has like any substance or value that can like make that jump or fly under the radar. for this team, because it looks like just AHL average at best, maybe fourth line prospects for the Avalanche. But yeah, this one was really tough. And probably the only time I'm going to say not applicable or no answer, because it really was tough to try and find one.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. That's why I'm kind of cheating it a little too. And I'm picking someone that was in all of our top fives, but I have him at 3 and you both had him at 5, I believe. I'm going with Jean-Luc Foudy. I'm a pretty big fan of his, honestly. I think he scored 36 points in 46 games in the AHL last year. That's not bad at all. I mean, he's not a big name, but he's a right-handed center. He's a little undersized. But he was one of the better skaters probably in the 2020 draft, I'd say. And he went all the way down in the 3rd round. He's played a lot of pro hockey. Like, he got drafted, I believe, out of the OHL and then played in Sweden during that COVID year, a little bit in the AHL. And then he's only been in the AHL ever since. Actually, until this year, where he got a few games in the NHL. Didn't score any points, but he got 9 games, which is not bad for, what is he, 21 now at this point? I think so. Really great skater, top speed, good hands. I don't know. I think he's going to be an NHL player probably next year, partly because the depth has been drained out of the lineup for Colorado a little bit. But I think he'll play most of this season in the NHL. And I think he can grow to be a decent middle 6 wing, probably. Maybe a good 3rd liner, which would be huge for them at this point. It's not a Callum Ritchie, not a Mikhail Gulyayev type impact in the long term, probably. But a full-time NHL player out of a 3rd round pick is pretty impressive. So I'm going to go with Jean-Luc Foudy as underappreciated here. And last question for you guys. This one, opposite end of the spectrum, I assume. Peter, where would you rank the Avalanche's prospect pool in the NHL?
Toss up between 31 or 32. I mean, sorry, as fans, but it's obviously with the success that this team has, and even making the playoffs with the roster that they currently have, like, it's so impressive. But I mean, when you even compare to other teams like the Boston Bruins, Pittsburgh Penguins, they at least have a little bit more substance to be a little bit higher up in terms of rankings. But for me, Colorado is at the bottom, either 31 or 32.
Wow. Okay, that was aggressive, but I appreciate your
sorry about that.
Your bluntness. No, it's all good. Someone's got to be at the bottom, so might as well pick them. Matt, what about you? Where would you rank the Avalanche across the league?
Oh, yeah, I'm not going to go as bad as Peter. I'll go 30, because I think there's a couple other teams that are worse, and one of them is the Boston Bruins. But I think Avalanche have a good amount, and they would be 32 if they didn't draft Callum Ritchie and Mikhail Gulyayev this past draft. They bumped them up for me at least a little bit. So I'm going to say 30, but it's still not that good.
Okay. So one better than Peter.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're rising. Well, I'm going to keep them rising.
That one spot makes a difference.
It does make a difference. I'm just off the top of my head here. I was writing down a couple teams that I think have worse prospect pools. I agree that Callum Ritchie and Gulyayev are probably the difference between being the worst prospect pool and being slightly better than the worst. But I've got, off the top of my head, not really looking at the pipelines in this moment, the Bruins, Islanders, the Lightning, and then maybe the Oilers and Penguins below them, just because, I mean, I'm a big Braden Yeager fan for the Penguins, but one great player at the top of the prospect pool compared to 2 slightly less great in Ritchie and Gulyayev. I'm going with the depth over in that case. And then Edmonton is iffy, but definitely over Bruins, Islanders, and Tampa for me. Just, I think Ritchie and Gulyayev will be real players, really good players too. So I think if all of those teams are above them, that would be 27th, but definitely close to bottom 5. It's looking pretty rough. It looks better than it did 2 months ago, but it is pretty rough in Colorado's prospect pipeline right now, which is okay because they won the cup and they have a real chance of doing it again in the next 5-6 years at least. So I'm sure they're not too worried right now, but it'd be nice to keep developing that. Anyway, okay, that wraps up our pipeline review for today. We're gonna wrap up the show as we always do with our prospect of the week. So Peter, I'm gonna come to you first on this one. Who is your prospect of the week?
Again, really tough considering that there are no games or prospects being shown on air right now. But if I have to pick one, I'm going to probably start with, the 2024 draft. And going back, looking at the Pellikka Gretzky Cup, I'm going to pick Maxim Massé as my prospect of the week. Mainly also because I believe like QMJHL preseason has started, if I'm not mistaken. But as early rankings start, Massé has an unbelievable shot and drive for the net. Like, this is a guy that scored 5 goals in five games for Team Canada. Again, I know, Logan, we probably talked about this before, like weeks ago, where maybe he doesn't have the best foot speed, skating mechanics are way off, but he makes up for that with the smarts, with the ability to get into the open areas and make himself a threat. And that to me is, you have some sort of deficiency to your game, but you make up for it in another. And he could be very dangerous, especially buzzing around the net. And I think he's going to have another strong, impactful season in the QMJHL. Believe was rookie of the year. 62 points in 65 games. Definitely not bad at all. And yes, he was rookie of the year for the QMJHL. CHL rookie team, CHL rookie of the year as well. So he's got a lot of accolades last season. So that is definitely something to build off of for Massé.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the year goes for him, because I could see a world where he gets the Cohen-Zimmer treatment. He's got the offense and the goals, but the skating just does not click, and teams get so worried that he falls to, I think, middle of the second round or late third round. For Zimmer this last year. But I can also see a world where he shows enough skating that with all the smarts and the shot that you were talking about, he could be a first rounder. He's definitely got a shot at that right now. The door's open with all those accolades he's racked up and all the points he's racked up. So he'll be a fun one to watch for sure. Definitely excited. I'm just excited for the new draft to get going, to watch all these players again. It's a bummer we got to wait a while for Max Celebrini to play in college, but he'll be there soon anyway.
I think we got enough tape on him, though.
Yeah, we probably have enough to know that he's pretty good.
Yeah,
enough for now at least. Matt, what about you? Who's your prospect of the week this week?
I'm going to be a homer and pick a Canucks prospect because he just kind of on my I'm still calling it Twitter timeline. Mitch Brown did some tracking of his of this guy. I'll say his name first. Daimon Gardner. He was drafted by the Canucks in 2022, 4th round pick. Played for the Tri-City Storm in the USHL this past season. Will be playing for the Clarkson University in the NCAA this coming season. And he was tracking his playmaking, his passing, and really high-end passer, according to the stats, according to his tracking data, and one of the best playmakers. And he's just, he kind of caught my eye. I'm like, whoa, I didn't think he was that good, as a playmaker in the USHL this past season, but he was. According to the track, 98. That's pretty high. For if you want to look at it, just go and just type his name in. You'll find him. You'll find these 2 tweets by Mitch Brown and Daniel Gee. They both elite prospects. They were for elite prospects, and lots of good stats there. And he's catching my eye a bit more. He was a bit of an interesting one when they drafted him. He's 6'4", big centerman. Very good package, I think, to get in the 4th round. Was injured actually to start this season, and ended up playing 46 games, 42 points. 30 of those points were assists. So I'm looking for him. I'm going to be watching him quite closely for Clarkson University this coming season, because he's a bit more of an intriguing prospect after seeing a bit of that, tracking, and high-end playmaker. Hopefully, maybe could potentially be a 3rd-line center for the Canucks in the future, and they need all the help they can get down the center, center ice, because they don't really have a lot of high-end guys coming. So if he can hit, that'd be really good for the Canucks. But I'm gonna be watching him closely this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Damon Gardner. Well, it feels like the USHL doesn't get enough attention during the draft cycle. But even less attention than that is the high school circuit, the high school prep circuit, which is where Gardner was drafted out of.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had like almost 3 points a game in his draft year in that league. But because it's not scouted as heavily, because it's not the most common draft year league, it's kind of hard to find what that like the equivalency between that and the USHL or the whole CHL, or like it's tough to know what that means. When you see that point, it's like awesome, but like, what does that mean? It means at this point that he's a really great playmaker and he's really big. So yeah, that's a pretty nice place to start, and hopefully he can work his way towards the pro game with some time.
His skating needs work, but we'll see how that kind of goes in the NCAA. But yeah.
It should be a fun one to watch. I'll say mine quick. I mentioned him earlier. My prospect of the week is Axel Sandin Pellikka. He's looked great in preseason play in the SHL this year. Several NHL players like to join, Swedish NHL players join SHL training camps just to kind of start preparing themselves for NHL training camps in the NHL season. Philip Gustafsson, goaltender for the Wild, is one of them. Was really great in the NHL last year, like really underrated. I think he had at least close to a .930 save percentage, which is elite if he can keep that up. There's a clip going around on Twitter you can find of Axel Sandin Pellikka in practice on a breakaway, just undressing him as a like 5'11" defenseman, which is really fun to watch. I mean, it's a breakaway, so it's kind of a coin toss a lot of the time anyway. But to see a smaller defenseman just tearing through a great NHL goalie already when he's just 18, it's pretty nice to see. But in some of the preseason play, offensively and defensively, he's been quite solid. We've talked a lot this year about his offense, but also about how his defense is a bit underappreciated. Because when you say someone's good at offense, the assumption is that they're bad in the other way, but he's actually pretty good at that too. So yeah, ASP for me. I'm excited to see what he can do this year in a full pro season, and probably not too long after that, maybe in North America. So that's my prospect of the week, and that will do it for us this week, actually. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Prospect Corner. Make sure you subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel to make sure you catch all our new episodes, and also make sure you check out our site, thehockeywriters.com, for tons of draft and prospect coverage over the rest of the offseason, which is starting to wrap up, which is really exciting. Thank you, Peter and Matt, as always, and thank you all for tuning in to this week's episode of Prospect Corner. We'll see you next time.